Welcome, folks. You are listening to Race Matters, and I'm Eddie Carson, the host here. And you are listening to WJOPLP Newburyport 96.3. You can find Race Matters also on SoundCloud as well as YouTube. As always, one of the things we look to do here is we really look to delve into the nomenclatures of race, culture, society, all the things in which we look to elicit some normative form of justice here in the 21st century. And that may require us dipping back into the 20th century. And for those of you who know me, one of the things you know is that I'm not a fan of the 20th century. I'm a product of the 20th century, but I've tried to cleanse myself of the injustices from slavery, or the elements and the remnants of slavery that we call Jim Crow, to the injustice towards marginalized folks, queer folks, indigenous people, women, and we can go on and on. And the challenge of that is the fact that those remnants continue here in the 21st century. And hopefully you've tuned in, you've dialed it up a little bit so you can learn, you can grow, you can have conversations, ask questions, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me. And you may not always agree with me. That's okay, but you know what? You're listening, so that means you're curious and you want to learn a little bit here. So, Brother Carson is here, and I'm excited because I have just a brilliant intellectual, a radical, an intellectual, an activist, a globe trotter, a brother who has spent extensive time overseas and not just in the hood here in the United States. And sometimes I always have to check in just to find out where our guest Mark Lipman is at, because I mean he could be anywhere and you just don't know. He escapes boundaries and borders and all those things, which that's the kind of world we want to live in, a world in which people can navigate spaces without the injustices of walls and fences. And you got to look a certain way and you got to have a certain type of income in order to occupy those things that are there. That's part of the funk. Brother Mark Lipman, how you doing, my friend?
Excellent. Eddie, thank you so much for welcoming me to Race Matters. This is such an important program that I've been following for a long time now, as you've developed a voice for the voiceless here. So thank you for welcoming me to the show.
I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I didn't share about Mark that I should have is Mark is an editor, a publisher, writes so much stuff and really find ways to expand that message of the voiceless to countless folks. And I don't mean just domestically, but I'm also talking about globally, internationally, that's here too. You know, Mark, one of the things that I'm excited about, and one of the reasons I have you here, is the fact that you've organized one of the things that you do very, very well, a program that's happening at Buttonwoods Museum on, there you go. That's it right there, on at Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill, Massachusetts, on March the 20th. You've organized a panel. I'm going to go ahead and be transparent and say, folks, because I'm honored to have been invited to be a speaker. And I'm just going to tell you, if you know anything about me, I'm just going to boast just a little bit. You're in for a treat. And I'm just going to be honest, right? So, Mark, tell us a little bit about the program. What can folks anticipate? Why should they attend and participate? And how will they grow? And what are some of the things that are kind of unraveling in that genius mind of yours, my friend?
Well, I've got to tell you, this is something that is coming at a moment much needed. We've seen everything that's been happening around the country, around the world in these last couple months here. And we had been planning this kind of community conversation out for a long time now. This is part of a larger program that I'm putting together, which is going to be a television program called Endless Horizons that I'm doing with our local television station, HC Media, which is going to be a poetry adventure television series focused on social justice, as I take this poetry bus across the country in the vein of Ken Kesey, with a caravan of poets going from community to community, connecting our poets and connecting our communities on the themes of peace and building a vision for a better world. And this event right here is going to be the first event, the centerpiece for our opening pilot episode, which is the background, the origin story, because it takes place here. It's all being built out of from Haverhill, Massachusetts. So we're doing a series of events to launch this national tour to build a vision of a better world, a better society that we can create. And this is the first event to make that happen. So this is some groundbreaking work that we're doing that just happens to fit exactly in a moment of time when we need it. And what we're going to do, this is actually a nonpartisan style event because we know that it is a system, not a symptom. And it's not a person or a party, but it's an entire system that has come to a climax here of as far as it can go. And now it's eating itself and us with it. And so, what this forum is going to do is to connect our great minds, our great thinkers, knowing the history of where we have come from, how we've gotten here, and then taking that with our great poets out here. And we're making a discussion panel with poetry. And we've got yourself. You're actually our keynote speaker at the event because there's no one I know better that can tell it like it is than Edward Carson here. So I am honored to be having you as our main event for this kickoff season here that we're going to be starting with you on stage that night. Your co-guest speaker here is Sharona Bollinger from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. She's a labor and community organizer with her. And she's going to be breaking down some of the how we got there and where their vision is of what we can create. With that, we have the state of Maine Beat Poet Laureate, Claire Conroy. We have the co-founder of the New England Poetry Renaissance, Jeremiah Walton, and we have the Poet Laureate of Haverhill, Massachusetts, Dan Spears, rounding up the panel. And I'm going to be your moderator. And something you actually maybe didn't mention in the intro here is that I am the current U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate. So we're combining our activism with our imagination and our creativity to find a cultural solution. Because to be honest with you, I really don't have much faith in a political solution for where we're at today. What these times call for is a poetic solution, is a poetic justice. And it's the poets and it's the great thinkers that are going to lead that way. And this conversation may just be the first conversation of its type happening here in the United States right at this apex moment of capitalism where it's make or break for our entire society, our entire culture, our entire way of living right now, because they're going after everything now. And this isn't one side or the other. It's a combination of the greater and the lessers, and all of those who kept us moving in the direction that we've been going in for too many decades now, ignoring the solutions that have come from the ground, from the working class, from the people who have actually lived the problems that we have the solutions for that they don't want to hear.
Fired up, my friend. Are you kidding me? Oh, folks, I mean, talk about someone who can drop a beat, a poetic beat when you ask a question just like that and is ready to do some really good hard work. And my friend, it's interesting because you lay that out and folks hear you and they're thinking, oh, this is going to be great. First of its kind, need to show up, great speakers, all of these things. And people are unaware of the amount of work. I mean, you're a hard working person that has to work, navigate spaces, cross all type of political lines, racial lines, all of that stuff to bring folks into the fold here in Haverhill, Massachusetts. So, question for you, my friend, and I'm curious about this one too. While we heard some of the crises that have developed, and we all are aware of those crises that are there, what would you say was the one moment that inspired this event, this envisioning America, bringing thinkers and activists and poets and folks across the color line and all people together in Haverhill, Mass?
Wow, that is an important question. This gets into roots of many things. As you were asking the question, Ashley, several moments popped into my mind. The first moment was 9/11.
Yeah.
That's what sparked the whole thing. It was actually funny enough, it was on 9/10 was the day that I wrote my first political poem about how George Bush would destroy us if given the chance. On 9/11, our world changed. And on that day, I discovered that the course of my career, of my life, would be using what talent I have to speak truth to power. And so that was really what got the ball rolling for me. I say you
Oh,
ready
so
to ask a
no,
question.
no,
So,
you're good. No, 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 no. So when you start off that way, right, and you're already starting to think in this conscious way about the challenges, those things
mm,
that are there. Do you consider, this is a hard question, so
yeah.
you can answer it however way you want to answer it. Do you consider yourself prophetic?
I wouldn't call myself prophetic. Uh, I don't want to bring ego into this.
Oh,
Uh,
I like the humbleness. All right,
okay.
all right,
Uh,
yes.
what I would say is that the role of a poet, and that's an artist, that's someone who's using their mind to examine the world they live in. They're hip to the times they live in.
Mhm.
And it takes many a lot longer to catch up, to maybe have the courage to face the moment that they live in. And so a lot of times we go along through life with blinders on. We just don't want to see.
Mm.
It's the poet's job to open our eyes and to see and to hear and to speak about what is happening in this world. This is just part of the job. I'm not trying to predict the future or anything. After so many years, you can just read the tea leaves. You can see where things are going. You can see the direction we're heading in. And sometimes it takes getting uncomfortable to be able to face that. But until you rip that band aid off, you can never deal with the wound itself. And the
Ooh.
wounds of America go very, very deep.
Brother, trust me. And I know that, and my work and my research, my writing, the things that I delve into for a little bit, especially for the fact that sometimes we want to, you know, what exists is the sense of amnesia,
Yeah.
right? And it kind of pops up, and we want to disavow the past without recognizing the fact that we never really addressed the past and the struggles. And that exists, right? Well, we can delve into the pointed stuff when it comes to, working class folks and their exploitation. We're talking about black and brown folks, women, queer folks, indigenous folks, undocumented folks, our undocumented friends that's there. But those elements are there. And one of the things you just said, of course, is, and I love the way you phrased this, the job of the poet. I mean, that line right there is powerful. Tell us a little bit about how Poetry resonates, how it touches on folks regardless of your age, your gender, your political orientation, all of those things that brings us to the fold in a way in which we need to explore, delve into, and wrestle with contemporary problems that really have come about due to pre-existence problems that were there.
Well, first off, why do we love comics so much? Because they're able to get us to think about something important by using another part of our mind that's making us laugh, that makes us comfortable with being able to deal with something that's serious. Poetry, arts, creativity is all in that same nature, is that we're engaging a different part of our mind to be able to deal with the problems that are there. And we're dealing with it in a creative way, in a way that uses imagery and metaphor and the beauty of language as well. Because there are, as a poet, as an artist, I look at there's four pillars of our work. And it might sound corny, but it's truth, beauty, freedom, and love. If you encompass those four pillars in your work, you have something that people will willingly engage with. And as a poet, I'm also thinking, how can I make my words beautiful? So people want to engage with that. And when they engage with the language, then they're able to engage with the lyrics. You understand that, yes? Because you have to make it something that people will gravitate towards. That's what the arts do. That's what allows us to open up that third eye, as they may say, to get into our minds and into our hearts, into our spirits of what we really think is possible in this world. Because everything we have today, everything we see today is all man-made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've all done it to ourselves. And we can undo it to ourselves as well. It just takes the imagination, the vision to see that we can have something better, that we can create something better. And how that starts is with our artists and our poets and all of this. These are the people, yourself included, are philosophers and historians and great thinkers. History is very, very important as they're rewriting history in the present moment and disappearing our history. Our historians are so important these days because this is how we're going to know where we came from, to know what we're fighting, to know where we need to get to. If we lose contact of how we got to this moment in time and they just rewrite our history for us, you think these times are dark. So this is the moment. This is actually a hopeful moment for us because, you know, as much as people like to go after the Chinese, I'm just sidetracking here. You know, it, the Chinese haven't had war with anyone. They haven't, invaded anyone. They've been building their infrastructure. They go overseas, they build hospitals and highways and schools. What do? We export war. But the reason I mentioned the Chinese is because the Chinese have a word. And the word in English is danger. It's a moment of danger. There is both danger and opportunity. Whenever there are crisis moments like this, there's both danger and opportunity. In Chinese, there's that one word for it. I don't know the word off the top of my head, but this is a moment that we're living in, that we have a terribly dangerous moment, but great opportunities. And why? It takes something like what's happening right now for the system to expose itself. All the facades are gone.
Mm.
All the makeup is off. All the curtains are drawn back. We see, and people across all political spectrums here are seeing what's happening to them and how the rush to destroy everything is backfiring spectacularly. This is a moment where we can truly organize across economic lines because the economy of America, the economy of capitalism is greed, racism, and bigotry. And I'm not promoting any economic system. I do point out, though, that something that the communist systems don't have is homelessness. These are just facts that I'm observing.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying this is a way socialism has some really good things about it, where about healthcare, housing, education that you don't go into debt for the rest of your life. Those are some good socialist policies. Perhaps though it's time to start looking at this. And I'm now you got me thinking, Eddie. I'm sorry about this. Now,
That's
you know
okay,
how
my
they're going
friend.
after Social Security right now.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yes.
okay, they're going after Social Security. So perhaps it's the time. Maybe it's the moment to have a conversation of a universal basic income. Maybe if Social Security has had its day, maybe it's time to guarantee everyone a stable income because we know what the rents are. We know what the cost of food is. We know how the greed of the billionaire class has made it impossible for half, 60%, 70% of this country to survive day to day. At, at some point, push does come to shove. And this is what I said earlier about not having faith that there's a political solution left
Mhm.
when they don't allow us a political solution. Because remember, you know that I was one of these people back in 2016, back in 2020, rallying behind Bernie Sanders because Bernie was our compromise.
Do you still feel that way?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. It's after 4 years of silence, after continuing war hawking, shepherding people back into the blue fold isn't going to be a solution for our class.
So, question for you. So, when we think about the elements, envisioning a future, thinking about the radical poets, the folks who are going to carry the message, who are going to inform and allow progress, what do you think the compromise is? And that's where we're at right now. We're at this
Ah,
crossroads right now where it feels that we're tearing each other apart. Like the whole system, we are fighting each other, and maybe you're not thinking about the system that you pointed out. That's
mhm.
the problem. It's not always ideological, it's not always a party, but it's a system. So, and clearly, and Bernie Sanders is a part of that, is a
Yeah.
part of that system, but he's not that compromiser. What is the compromise? How does that happen?
Um,
That's a hard
that,
question. I know, my friend.
this this is a very good question, and the how to enter into it. Um, the system is purposefully designed to divide us,
Mm. And
and
it's quite successful.
quite successfully, yes. And because of this, um, they know how to push our buttons. They know how to trigger us. They trigger us between red and blue for the most part. As much as they trigger us between black and white, they trigger us between red and blue. And this is so that we don't all unite around our common needs: housing, healthcare, food, education. Because if you travel, when you travel, you discover, when you meet new people in other cultures and really discover how other people live, most people only want those basic things. They just want to be left alone. They don't want to be harassed. They just want to raise their kids and have a good life. Most of, when we hear about crime and all this, most of this crime has been imposed on us by forcing us into poverty.
Mm.
And only now are people starting to feel how poverty is affecting them as well. And if you're new to poverty, see, if you're new to poverty, you don't know how to respond to poverty. If you've grown up through poverty, if you've had generational poverty, you know that it's a lot shorter of a distance to go from the sidewalk to the gutter than falling from the penthouse. And those who are new to poverty are kind of freaking out. And these are the ones that, they like to drag into the division here is, they're freaking out, so they want to give them some to blame. The blame game is easy. And when we finally settle down and have these types of conversations that we need, we understand that we have more in common than we ever could have apart from each other. And when we're working together, we're actually able to create the social safety net that, in the system that we have, in the dream of America, where the sky is the limit. Well, there also needs to be a limit at the bottom of how far someone can go in society. That is the social contract,
Mhm.
is that we allow you to achieve your greatest dreams as long as the poorest among us doesn't fall beneath a certain standard of living. And we have been chipping away and chipping away at this for 50 years now. And at this point, enough people are starting to wake up. And this is what gives me hope that so many people are now awake. And they want us to think that this is a moment when it's too late. There's nothing we can do. But that's where opportunity comes in. And this is the opportunity for us to unite in a nonpartisan way. And when I say that, I don't think there's a political solution. I really don't. I think they've taken that away from us. Now, what I do like about the socialist parties that have been out there is they've been consistent for 100 years now. And they are working towards a better world. And I dig what they're saying. And I will help them build a political solution to get their elections. I think we should need one left party instead of three or four left parties going. We need the Greens, we need the Socialists, we need all the other parties coming together to form another party. That I don't know if that's in the near future. I will support them any way I can because I like the direction they're going to. They're a legitimate opposition force to the two-party capitalist system we've got. But truly, the pressure has to come from the ground. It has
So,
to come from people every day.
so you talk about the everyday person, and one of the things that I like that you
Yeah.
mentioned, of course, is this notion of being hopeful. I'm not, and folks who've listened to this before, and folks who know that I'm not an optimistic person. I was optimistic when I was much younger, but I am hopeful because
Yeah.
without hope, then, why do we do the things that we do to make things better? I think about all the great work that you do in the ways in which you look to inform. You know, Mark, one of the things that I'm curious about too, and before I ask this question, I just want to welcome folks who may just be chiming in to Race Matters. I'm Eddie Carson, and my host is Mark Lipman, and we're really delving into a lot of great stuff, particularly as we think about the Envisioning America panel and in some of the series that Mark has just launched. It's going to be held on March 20th at the Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill, Massachusetts. I invite you to turn out. It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic. No, it doesn't sound like it. It will be. Me pause there. It will be a fantastic event. You know, when we talk about this sense of hopefulness, and I deal with young folks quite a bit, and one of the things that I've seen particularly proliferate over the last, couple of decades, and arguably before then, is the fact that young folks are drawn to poetry. There used to be this thing, and I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to tell on myself for a second. When I was in high school, back in the dark ages, when I was in
Mm.
high school, before, we even knew how to spell the word internet. and all of those things that are there. I remember avoiding, I would say avoiding, just not having a kind of interest in poetry courses, not being introduced to poetry, the ways that poetry is, and all of those things, right? I always thought about poetry as the opening, one of the scenes in the movie with the late Robin Williams, the late great Robin Williams. I'm a fan of Robin Williams, who they start talking about rhyme and meter, and he's ripping out the pages. And I'm sure I know you know the scene, and
Sure.
this is not poetry, right? That scene's quite radical in and of itself. Do you believe that? Well, let me rephrase this. Why do you believe so many young folks, common folks, you don't have to walk around with a fancy college education or live in an ivory tower or be this or be that to be a great poet?
Mm,
Why are young folks and why are folks in general just drawn to poetry without that fear I once had back in
mm.
the days of Dead Poet Society?
Well, from my experience, poetry saves lives. Poetry gives you a way out of the system. And when I say poetry, I mean all the arts, but poetry is really deep because that is using our voice to tell our story, to tell our experiences, to share and find people who to have maybe similar and same stories as we do. And that's how we build community because the way out of all this starts at the local level, starts at the community level. And the one thing that poetry builds is community. I tell people all the time that I through poetry, because of poetry, I'm able to live a six-figure lifestyle on a
Mhm.
four-figure income.
Oh, I like that saying.
Okay? Because of poetry, doors open. I can go to any city on this planet and find a poetry group where I can connect into and show up at an event, do an open mic, do a feature, meet a couple people, and get into a community anywhere in this world. And when you start traveling, what happens? You get invitations to go to other places and other places. I've got standing invitations to just to go to 1,000 different places
Mm.
uh, just through poetry. And if anyone wants to really know the trick, first keep a notebook. You have to start writing. You have to do something. You have to
Right. And there's got to be
expressing
labor in
yourself.
there.
All right. You have to have something to show, and it's important because people think that I'm going to write one poem and I'm going to be a superstar. I'm going to write one book and it's going to happen for me. And it doesn't happen that way. It takes years and decades of consistent work. But what happens is when you've got to a point where you've actually produced so much work, have expressed your voice and done enough stuff, suddenly overnight, you have nothing left to prove to yourself. Then you have nothing left to prove to anyone. And you're just a poet at that point. You're just the artist at that point. And how you start off, I have a friend that I met at Shakespeare and Company when I was living in Paris. And he used to tell me, yeah, he was kind of like me, 30, 40 years ahead of me. He wrote like 12 novels, traveled the world and all this stuff. And I met this guy and he just filled up the room. And he said, the trick is you pay your money and you take your chances.
Mm.
You buy the plane ticket, you get on the bus, you take a chance on yourself, on you being able to make it through. And when everyone asks me what it takes, what it costs you to achieve your dream, it costs you everything. Everything you are. You have to put yourself in 100%. You have to believe so much in yourself that the world starts believing in you. And the number one thing that is in my kind of philosophy on life, and I know I've taken an abstract path here,
Mhm.
okay? Um, Back in 2003, I was walking along this coastline in the island of Corsica, and I had dared myself to just walk the coast. It's a 300 kilometer coast. And I just said, I want to do this. And the only way there was to walk. So I did. And after the first night, I slept on the beach. I made my backpack. I'm walking along the coastline. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight.
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm going to eat today. But I woke up this morning and all my time is my own. They haven't found a way to kill me yet. At that moment, it was kind of like an epiphany to me where time became my most valuable commodity and not how much money, not the bling, not the stuff that I could collect, but the memories, the experiences I could make through the time, how I use my time in this life that I'm given. And what is a more noble pursuit than to be able to put your voice to making a better world for all of us?
Man,
And when you go this route, it's scary at first. It is. When I cut up my credit cards in 2001,
good for
cut them
you.
up to that's it.
Good for
Okay.
you.
And the first month was horrible because, I start the month at 1,500 in debt. And then I'm having to, but the next month it's a little less, a little less. And then all of a sudden, I've got a little bit in my pocket at the end of the month. And it starts to turn around. And then once you realize that your time is more valuable than the money and that the experiences, you start getting on a whole other trajectory. You start becoming, going on that artist path of this is who I have to be. But you also desensitize yourself to all this money stuff that we're going through right now. And we need to get to this point of re-evaluating what has a worth in our lives.
You say think about that word worth, and I'm sitting and I'm listening to you and how we prioritize things. And, for me and people who know me, you know, I think it's important that I connect with folks. I break bread with folks, right? The idea of developing meaningful relationships, moving beyond external things such as wealth and materialisms, and all of those things that tell us, this is how you should look important, you should feel important. This makes you important, and for you to really delve into that particular life. There are folks listening and they're nodding their heads and they're saying, "Amen, brother, absolutely." Yet in the back of their consciousness, they're sitting there and they're wrestling with the idea, like, I just don't know if I can do anything as radical as Brother Mark Lipman to live that good life.
However, I've got a skill set, you've got a skill set, everyone's got a different skill set. And this is important to understand because the question is, what can I do about it? This is the big question everyone always has. What can I do about it? And if voting our way out of the mess isn't a solution anymore, what can I do about it? If calling our representatives and protesting them is no longer a solution, what can I do about it? And what I say is that each one of us has something in us, some skill set that we can put towards a movement. The first thing we need, of course, is our community. It's the relationships, like you were saying, our relationships. And that's why I think our poetry circles are so important because our poetry circles, our poetry networks are more expansive than actually our activist networks are. And so it doesn't matter what field you're in, whatever type of work you do, you can use consciousness through whatever your skill set is, to make a difference in your everyday life with the relationships around you, knowing that you're not keeping it to just a circle of your close family and friends, but you're expanding it to the larger community, getting involved where you can. And this is what the system tries to prevent us from doing. Now, I was talking about time is
Mhm.
our commodity. How they try to prevent us from pitching in is by stealing our time, making it so expensive to live that we have no time left to organize or to take a class or to meet with our friends or something. And what they want us to do is become isolated and feel like we're all in this by ourselves when we're really not. So building community should really be our first number one goal because it's all local. It all starts local. That's where we have our most strength. Our greatest power is at the local level. And it's like one of the things that I do when I go to a new community, and I'm originally from this area, by the way. I was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, just down the street here. I've got family ties in Haverhill going back 25 years. So this is a home for me on this planet. And one of the things that I do when I go anywhere is I I look and find out what's happening on the local scene. A couple things that I got in touch with right away was Creative Haverhill. They're doing the Cogswell Center. They're converting the old school into an arts center. I saw, oh, they're
Oh.
doing something neat. Why don't I find out about them and get involved with them? I looked and found out about HC Media. And as you know, I had a radio program for 2 years in Los Angeles. And for me, I've always wanted to go into film. I've always wanted to go into television. Well, I found out there's a local community television station here, which is in really every community in Massachusetts. I'm not sure about the rest of New England, but in Massachusetts, every community has a local community television station. And so I'm able to access the tools to create this program that I'm doing. So I'm able to cut my costs. If I had to buy cameras and all this, it cost me thousands of dollars. No, I get to use the community resources to be able to produce my art. And I want to go and I'm stepping up my game, I'm evolving as an artist, going now I'm from poetry to radio now to television. And I'm able to use what resources I find within the community. And what happens with that is I start getting new friends in the community, new people that didn't know the work I was doing before who were like, wow, I really dig the work you're doing. Doing this work with HC Media, I produced a few poetry shows with them over the last year. Well, they're partnering with me to create this television program, and they're actually giving me an extended loan on the equipment so I can film this whole national tour. And we're going to be doing like a 12 episode series combining poetry and social justice. And what we're doing is each community we go to, that's the spotlight. We're going to be focusing on what's happening there, how they're being part of the solution, whether that's creatively, so on the social justice side. We're going to tell the story of the community that we go to, using the bus as that connective tissue, as the catalyst between communities to weave the story together.
I love that. That's
And
beautiful.
and it's going to be a blast. I've got 25 venues set up. I'm featuring at the Gonzo Fest for Hunter Thompson down in New Orleans in May. In June, I'm the keynote speaker at the Route 66 Festival in Albuquerque. And we're going just zigzagging tour with a whole group of poets. Like I said, there's going to be about 100 of us around the country connecting into this at one point or another. People are going to be getting on the tour, they're going to be dropping off the tour. And this first leg out to Los Angeles is really the first leg because we're going to be continuing this over the years. You'll see the progression as we go. I promise you that.
Well, I tell you what, my friend, I'm excited about this. I'm all jazzed up, and as a person who lives and think about the aesthetics of jazz all the
Yeah.
time, I mean, I'm just starting to hear the tunes of your great work in my head and what's going
Mm.
to happen. Folks, if you're chiming in, I'm Eddie Carson. This is Race Matters, and we're here with just an unbelievable poet and Mark Lipman, who has just informed us. And if you didn't hear earlier, we're really building up for an exciting event at the Buttonwoods Museum on March 20th in Haverhill, Massachusetts. That event on March 20th starts at 7 o'clock p.m. If you can't get there on time, show up at 6:50 p.m. So we're all ready to roll and everything too, because that's important, right? Because we don't want to miss a beat from the important words that folks are going to share. And as you continue to explore this show here on WJOPLP Joppa Radio, Newburyport 96.3, SoundCloud, and YouTube. I will hope you've informed or feel more informed by this because I know I have. Mark, as we come to a conclusion of this episode of Race Matters, and anytime I have outstanding guests, just time flies by always.
Mm.
And so I want to give you the last word, and I like to give my guests the last word before we call it a day. I would love for you to share and tell us a little bit about your own poetry as we start to narrow things down.
Well, tell you what, why don't I just give you a poem?
Love it.
All right. Um, and thinking about our conversation today, all I really have to say is that for all those who say it can never be done, who look upon those ivory towers with their militarized trenches, disappearing chambers, and puppet mechanisms, imitating human beings in all aspects, except for a conscience and a body to jail, enslaving a world with divisions of hate and sectarianism. I say, dream of a world which is at peace with itself, for all those who have given up hope, who have fallen to despair, who see the skies falling in on them and the shoreline inching closer, who have given into fear and the bitter tears of defeat. I say courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Stand tall and lead. For all those who dream of freedom, there is no easy path. Hills follow hills and mountains before we reach our valley. We must use our time wisely and see the horizon. Settle not for a life worth less than living. Reach with your first and very last breath towards victory to that mountain top, and we will all be there with you on the front line of life, standing in the light of that glorious sun. Lift up your hearts, the time is ripe. It always seems impossible until it is done.
Folks, Mark Lipman, this is Race Matters. Thank you for chiming in. Hope to see many of you on March 20th at the Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Thank you again.